Are big corporations stealing UK property and the opportunity for normal people to get onto the housing ladder? There's no doubt the UK is in a property crisis. What's actually causing it? Now, this video is in a response to a video I put out with Paul Champlina, the founder of Landlord-bashing, all about the renters' rights bill and what's happening and how that's causing many landlords deciding to sell up and get out the property game. Now, it was really interesting. There were some incredible comments coming back in response to that video. There were some very valid points. We had a few crazies coming out of the woodwork as well. And I just want to talk about some of those points. The fact is, there are big institutions, people like BlackRock, some of the pension companies who are buying up lots of housing stock. Now, why are they doing that? Well, everybody knows that property is a very good long-term investment, especially in somewhere like the UK, where generally property prices go up due to supply and demand. We have an increasing population. We do not have enough accommodation. So that's why generally rents and values go up over time. All of the major political parties in the UK accept and agree that the UK needs about 300,000 new homes every single year, and we are simply not building enough. However, both the Labour government and the Conservative Party in the last election campaign were both claiming to build 1.5 million new homes in their 5-year term. The Conservatives said they'd actually do 1.6. Now, of course, let's be really clear, governments don't build homes. Their job is to stimulate the economy and the environment to encourage developers to build homes. It was interesting, someone was commenting, or a few people commented that investors don't provide accommodation, builders do, which is complete rubbish. Now, builders build properties and they normally sell those properties to individuals who either live there or then rent them out. But as I said, we're seeing more and more corporates coming in as well. I think we need to be really careful. In the press, landlords are often vilified and a lot of renters really resent landlords, and we'll talk more about that later in this video. But I think you have to be very careful what you ask for. There's no doubt in my mind that most governments would like to not have as many private landlords. They'd like to have corporates and institutions managing property and providing the private rental sector. And I think the reason is the governments feel that these institutions and corporate bodies are easier to tax, they're easier to manage. But I think we have to be careful there, because if you have the majority of the private rental sector owned by these big corporates, well, they could probably push back a lot more against governments. They can lobby against governments. And actually, if the governments make things too difficult, they might just decide to completely exit the market. Then we really would be in a big problem. Whereas if you have a property owned by a landlord, a private landlord, from a renter's point of view, I think that's got to be a much better solution. Because if you have a corporate, they're going to have tick boxes, and if the tenant falls out of line, if they're late after 1 or 2 months, I very much doubt they're going to have the flexibility that an individual private landlord would have. I mean, with a big corporate, it's going to be, computer says no, you can't pay your rent, right, you're out the property. Whereas a landlord, a private landlord, can be a bit more flexible, a bit more human, and work with the tenants. After all, people do have problems, have circumstances, and I've had a number of situations on my properties where people had hard times, and I like to work with the tenants and come up with a win-win solution for everyone. I think if we had big corporates owning it, I think those days are going to end, unfortunately. A lot of property is owned by councils. You have social housing. And very often we hear about slum landlords who are not looking after their properties. And there absolutely are a few slum landlords out there who probably give landlords a bad name. In my experience, having been investing myself for 30 years and teaching other people how to become successful investors for 22 years, I can tell you the vast majority of people I have worked with, we want to be good landlords. We want to look after our tenants because we recognize our tenants are our clients who come back every month to our property business and help us make money. And why shouldn't people make money? You know, that's how the world goes round. You have a business, you need to make money to be able to pay your staff, to pay taxes, and make a profit to be incentivized to run the business in the first place. As a property investor, we are taking on a huge amount of risk. We're taking on debt, responsibility. Some investors make mistakes and end up going bust. And it's very hard for someone who's maybe in a job, they've never had that responsibility of having a business and having to pay people's salaries, of understanding that concept of taking on risk. It's It's very easy for them to sit there paying their rent in their house, moaning about the landlord making all this money. Well, you know what? Most people I know who are landlords, they didn't start with a silver spoon in their mouth. They didn't inherit a load of money. They built their property portfolio through hard work, toil, and graft. And I believe anybody, if they want to, can better themselves, can become a property owner, can become a landlord, an investor, providing good quality accommodation. Back to this idea of these slum landlords. Did you know that there are more social housing that is in substandard condition than privately owned property? And yet, it's the councils who often don't get into trouble for this. Some councils have actually been prosecuted because their properties have not been up to scratch. And yet you never really hear about those. It's always the landlords who are vilified by the press because they're making all this money. And as I said in previous videos, right now, because of the circumstances, because of the economy, many landlords are not making as much money as they used to make because interest rates have gone up. They've not pushed up their rents as much as they could because they've had good tenants that want to look after those. And this is one of the reasons we're seeing many landlords sell up. So I think there's a lot of dynamics that are affecting the UK property market. There's obviously this increasing demand and the macroeconomics of not enough supply and demand. There's also the makeup of how is property actually owned? Is it owned by corporates? Is it owned by social enterprise? Or is it owned by private individuals? You might have heard recently the housing minister has announced £39 billion is going to become available of new money to help provide social housing. Now, on the face of it, that might sound good, but it's a bit like this target of providing 1.5 million new homes. How on earth is that going to happen? Because having funding is one thing. But then when you go to the planning departments and there's just a complete slowdown in the process because the planning departments are dramatically underfunded. Many people who used to be in the planning departments have now changed from gamekeeper to poacher and have now become private consultants because it's so difficult to get planning through. There are a lot more consultants needed to help in that process. And even once you get planning permission on your property development, well, where are you going to find the skilled labour who can actually build it for you? So there are some fundamental issues in the UK property market. And I don't think this particular government, or to be fair, any previous government, has actually addressed those problems and worked out how can the government help stimulate the market. If there was a lot more property available, prices wouldn't be so high and it would be more affordable. So really, the government needs to take some advice of people who actually know what they're talking about and work out how can they help the developers to develop properties. And obviously, for someone to take on that risk of doing it, there's got to be some profit for them. If you're talking about increasing the percentage of affordable housing, which is property sold at a smaller profit or even no profit at all, and that's minimizing the profit, and then you're increasing the taxes that companies need to pay to employ people, you're not really creating an environment that's going to stimulate developers to want to build more property. So I would put a lot of money on a bet that the government is not going to hit their target of 1.5 million homes created the way they are going at the moment. It's time for the government and the civil servants to wake up and actually find out how can we all work together to provide more housing in the UK so that there's more supply, so rents are more affordable and the average person can get onto the housing ladder. People say that they think the government should introduce rent controls. Well, this was actually done in Scotland and it was a complete disaster. A lot of landlords decided to sell property. There was less available to rent, and that meant rents shot up massively. So I think governments who are sometimes well-intentioned, they're trying to do the right thing. Because of a lack of knowledge and understanding, they do knee-jerk reactions that actually cause investors to panic and investors to leave the private rental sector. So this is a big problem, and it's a problem that everyone's facing. But really, people need to sit down and really think about this, because there is a solution, but the government needs to come to the table and introduce some practical things that are actually going to encourage developers to build more houses rather than trying to tax them into the ground. And tenants need to recognize that actually having private landlords is probably a good thing, much better than having corporates who are not going to tolerate some of these persistent bad tenants. There are more bad tenants than there are bad landlords. And again, you don't really hear about bad tenants because people say, oh, this poor person, this situation. Well, I can tell you categorically, there are people out there who exploit the regulations and who deliberately try to prey on landlords who maybe don't know what they're doing. And you might say, oh, I'll serve them right. Well, sometimes those landlords are people who've got a job and they're trying to make a bit of extra money, and they bought a property, they've saved money, they bought an investment, and they're trying to build for their pension. And trying to provide for your pension is also an important thing, because you know what? One thing you need to be very aware of, if you are thinking, well, I'm going to work all my life and then I'm going to live on my pension, you have a shock coming. Right now, I think the average state pensioner is being paid less than £1,000 a month. That is not a lot of money to have a reasonable lifestyle in the UK with the spiraling costs we have right now. But you can do something about that. You can make a decision right now that actually you don't want to be poor in your old age. You want to have a more fruitful old age. You want to be able to enjoy your retirement. And one of the ways of doing that is investing in property. And there might be some people who are right now sitting in a bedsit flat. They don't have much money, thinking, oh, poor me. Well, you know what? You can decide right now to change your life. You can educate yourself. There's so much free content out there. You can decide to make a decision. And I think it's a real shame that more people in this country don't take personal responsibility for their situation. At the end of the day, we are all in a situation where we are right now based on all the decisions we've ever made. And sometimes people say, oh, this happened to me, this happened to me. Yeah, things happen. But you decide the meaning you give to those things. And either you can decide that poor you and sit and wallow in your sorrow because all the things that happened to you, or you can decide, you know, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to make a change. I'm going to improve my life. And ultimately it comes down to you. You know, there might be some people sitting there saying, well, it's all right for you, Simon. You've got successful business, you've got property, you've got money. You don't understand the problem I'm in. Well, actually, I probably do. When I finished university in 1994, it wasn't a great time to get a graduate job. There was a big recession, and for a period of time, I was unemployed. Actually, I was on unemployed benefits. I was sitting in a shared room in a HMO. It had no central heating, no double glazing, and I really thought, what the hell has happened to my life? I had this aspiration to go to university, work hard for 4 years. I came out with a good degree. I had a load of student debt, and I thought, what on earth am I going to do the rest of my life? And I must admit, I felt pretty sorry for myself at the time. But then I realized that, you know what? Actually, my success wasn't anyone else's responsibility, wasn't down to anyone else. It was all down to me. And I made the decision, I made the commitment to myself that I wanted a better life. And yeah, sure, I had days where I was feeling pretty sorry for myself and maybe I wanted to blame other people. But it's an interesting thing happens. When you point the finger of blame at someone else, you're pointing one finger at them, 3 fingers are pointing right back to you. And whether you believe in God or not, maybe there's a finger pointing up to a higher source as well. But you know what? When it comes down to it, I think a big problem in this country is that too many people are entitled. They think they should get all these things for free. They think it's someone else's fault, all the things that are happening to them. And look, sometimes bad things can happen to people. But we make a decision. What's the value? What's the meaning we give to those things? If you have the right mindset, maybe you decide, actually, I'm not going to put up this anymore. And that's the motivation for you to change your life. And unfortunately, there are too many people who think, oh, this is my situation. I can't do anything about it. But really, accepting personal responsibility for your life is where this all starts. And if you want to become wealthier, if you want to do better for yourself, a great thing to do is for you to learn how you can change your scenario, how you can invest in property and actually provide good quality accommodation for other people who can't afford to buy their own property or don't want to buy their own property. And providing a good service for other people then you can make money from doing that. And why shouldn't you make money for adding value to other people's lives? So I think people need to understand that landlords are out there. The vast majority of landlords are doing a good job despite all the regulations, all the changes. And yes, they make money, but why shouldn't they make money? Why should a landlord rent a property out, let someone live for free? Would you go to work for free? Probably not. Everyone's got to make some money. That's how the world goes round. So let's make some money. Let's pay some taxes. Let's stop blaming other people for our circumstances and take control of our lives. If you want to invest in property and learn how to better yourself, well, this YouTube channel is a great place to start. If you like this video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified anytime new videos like this come out. And I'd love to hear your comments below. What do you think should happen? Should we allow big corporates to swallow up all the UK accommodation? Or should there be private landlords providing good quality service? Or should the social services be providing all of the accommodation for people in the UK? What do you think? Come and comment below, and I'd love to respond to as many of your comments as I can. As ever, I encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill. If you want to change your life, you can absolutely do it, but it starts with you making a decision. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if I upset you, maybe you should think about what triggered you, and maybe you could do something to change your life. Thanks for watching.